Forgiveness. This is one of the biggest themes found throughout the Bible. I see that for the Christ follower, the more they forgive, the more they become just like who Jesus Christ actually was. The more they're removed from the bondage of unforgiveness, because when we practice unforgiveness, we become kind of like a monster and it just festers inside of us, all these grudges, all this hatred and ill thoughts, and that's not what Christ wants for us. Instead, he wants us fixated upon thoughts of the kingdom. And so here in this video, I'm going to unpack quickly for you 3 steps for biblical forgiveness. Okay, so have you ever had a friend or just someone you know who you ended up offending somehow, and they never quite forgave you because they would always bring up the offense? And it's like, man, you can't ever get away from this one wrong thing you did, or a couple wrong things you did, because this person did not want to fully forgive you. This brings us into our first step, which is to not bring back up the offense. It's pretty simple, but it's incredibly hard, especially if it's something that truly hurt you to the core. This step is pretty vital because it allows the past to live back in the past. It does not belong in the present, nor does it belong in the future. And so 2 verses that came to mind when I was going through this one was that love keeps no records of wrongs, and it covers a multitude of sin. And God wants us to be a people of love, a people of grace. So we have to learn, friends, not to bring back up an offense that has happened in the past. In this second step of biblical forgiveness, I see that our fleshly nature really tries coming out, because let's say you ended up becoming offended. Okay, so now you're the offended party, you're offender, he was a complete turd, she was a complete turd, and he deserves to have their sin or their error broadcasted to the whole world so everybody can know what kind of turd this person is. Friends, this is what our flesh desires. This is not what God desires. Often we don't even realize that we may be actually partaking in the slandering of someone's name, or actually gossiping about this person. So the second step of biblical forgiveness is to not partake in gossip. When Paul wrote to the church of Ephesus, he kind of touched on this. In Ephesians 4, he says this: "Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice." Friends, even though we may be full of anger at the moment and we want to show God's wrath to this person, it's not our job to do that. He also writes this: "Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear." Think about this. If you were to slander someone's name or gossip about them, are you really showing them grace? Are you going to be building them up with the conversation that you're having with whoever? All right, guys, the final goal of biblical forgiveness is to make your forgiveness to the offender unconditional. Unconditional forgiveness, guys. This mimics the sort of forgiveness that God has shown us. So this sort of forgiveness actually means that you forgive the person regardless to the amount of times they have offended you. You do not put any stipulations or any conditions upon the offender. That means that we cannot say this any longer: "Jeremy, I'll forgive you if you promise not to have another affair." Or, "Jeremy, I'll forgive you if you fill in the blank." Remember, friends, the pure goal of this last step of forgiveness is to really model what Jesus did, because he doesn't offer any stipulations. It's not our works that save us, but it's by his grace. So let's show that to the world around us. And I'll end with this verse out of Matthew chapter 18. We can see this conversation in between Jesus and his friend Peter. And Peter goes up to him and says, "Then Peter came up and said to him, 'Lord, how often will my brother sin against me and I forgive him? As many as 7 times?'" And listen to what Jesus responded right after this. He said, Jesus said to him, "I do not say to you 7 times, but 77 times. You know, this is a huge concept for men to take on, because this shows that God, He wants us to be all about His unconditional forgiveness that represents the grace and truth of all of who He is. And so friends, I encourage you, the next time you get offended, because you will, try to practice these biblical steps for forgiveness. Remember, do not bring back up a forgiven offense. Strive to not gossip. And lastly, forgive unconditionally. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I look forward to seeing what sort of comments or questions you may have in the feedback. Feel free to subscribe to this channel and have a blessed day.